The sun beat down mercilessly on Grace Coleman's back as she loaded her children's meager belongings onto a borrowed wagon outside the small clapboard house that had been their home for the past 3 years in Clifton Hill, Arizona territory. The landlord, a cruel man named Henderson, stood on the porch with his arms crossed, watching with cold satisfaction as she and her 5 children prepared to leave with nowhere to go. It was the summer of 1876, and Grace had just turned 28 years old, a widow for 2 years now since consumption had taken her husband Samuel. Her oldest daughter Margaret was 12, helping to calm 7-year-old Thomas, who was crying into her skirt. 9-year-old Daniel carried boxes with a stoic expression beyond his years, while 5-year-old Lucy clung to Grace's leg, and baby William, just 18 months old, wailed in the heat from where she had him wrapped against her chest. The eviction notice had come 3 days ago after she fell 2 months behind on the rent. Working as a seamstress brought in barely enough to feed 6 mouths, let alone pay for housing. Henderson had ignored her pleas for more time, and now here they were, standing in the dusty street with everything they owned and no place to shelter from the approaching evening. Grace tried to hold back her tears as she lifted Lucy onto the wagon bed. She needed to be strong for her children, though fear gnawed at her insides like a starving animal. The sun would set in a few hours, and she had no idea where they would sleep tonight. The church might offer refuge for a night or two, but Pastor Williams had already helped her so many times. She could not keep asking for charity when she had no means to repay it. A tall figure on horseback approached down the dusty main street of Clifton Hill. Grace barely glanced up at first, too focused on securing the ropes around their belongings, but Margaret tugged on her sleeve and pointed. The man riding toward them sat straight in his saddle, his dark hat pulled low against the sun. As he drew closer, Grace could make out a strong jaw, sun-bronzed skin, and eyes the color of a winter sky. He appeared to be in his early 30s, with broad shoulders and the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. The cowboy reined in his horse just a few feet from their wagon. He tipped his hat politely, his gaze moving from Grace to the children and then to the angry landlord still standing on the porch. Something in his expression shifted when he took in the scene before him. "Afternoon, madam," he said, his voice deep and warm like honey. "Name's Nathan Quinn. I just rode into town about an hour ago, looking to settle some business, but I could not help but notice your situation here." Grace felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. Here was a stranger witnessing their shame, their poverty, their desperation laid bare for all to see. "We are managing fine, sir. Thank you for your concern." Nathan dismounted in one fluid motion and moved closer, his eyes kind despite the hardness that came from years of outdoor living. "Madam, I do not mean to intrude, but I have seen enough of the world to know when someone needs help." "Are you and your children in need of a place to stay?" Grace's throat tightened. Pride warred with desperation inside her chest. "We were just evicted from this house. I'm afraid I fell behind on the rent, and Mr. Henderson there has run out of patience with us." Nathan glanced back at Henderson with an expression that made the landlord take a step back into the doorway. When he turned back to Grace, his face was gentle again. "I have a ranch about 5 miles outside of town. It is a good-sized place, belonged to my uncle who passed last month and left it to me in his will. I just arrived from Texas to claim it. The house has more rooms than I know what to do with, and it seems a shame for them to sit empty when you and your children need shelter." Grace stared at him, certain she had misheard. "Sir, I could not possibly accept such charity from a stranger. It would not be proper, and I have no way to repay you." Nathan's expression remained patient. "Madam, I am not offering charity. I am offering a business arrangement. That ranch needs work, a lot of it from what the lawyer told me. The house needs cleaning and proper care. There is a large garden that has gone to weeds. I imagine you know your way around a kitchen and keeping a household running. You could work for your keep, if that would make it more palatable to your pride. Margaret had moved closer, listening intently to every word. Daniel had stopped loading the wagon and was watching the cowboy with curious eyes. Even little Thomas had stopped crying, distracted by the beautiful chestnut horse that Nathan had ridden in on. My house has room for all of you, Nathan continued, his voice earnest. I would consider it a favor if you would accept. I have been sleeping rough and eating my own terrible cooking for the better part of 2 months on the trail. A proper home-cooked meal and a clean house would be worth more to me than gold right about now. Grace felt tears burning behind her eyes, but this time they were tears of relief rather than despair. She looked at her children, at their tired faces and dusty clothes, at baby William, who had finally stopped crying and was now reaching his chubby hands toward Nathan's horse. What choice did she have? She could not let pride doom her children to sleeping under the stars or in some filthy alley. I accept your offer, Mr. Quinn, she said quietly, extending her hand, but only as a working arrangement. I will not be beholden to anyone as a charity case. Nathan's face broke into a smile that transformed his serious features into something almost boyish. He took her hand in his, and Grace felt a strange warmth spread from where their skin touched. His hand was calloused and rough, the hand of a man who knew hard work, but his grip was gentle. You have my word, Mrs. Coleman, he said, somehow knowing her name though she had not offered it. He must have asked someone in town, she realized. This is a fair trade between two people who can help each other. Nothing more, nothing less. Henderson called out from the porch, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Well, ain't that a pretty picture? The widow finding herself a new man already. I am sure you two will be very cozy out there all alone. Nathan's jaw tightened, and he turned slowly to face the landlord. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried a weight that made Henderson's smirk falter. Careful with your words, friend. Mrs. Coleman is a lady, and I will thank you to speak of her with respect. She will be my employee and will be treated with all the dignity that entails. Anyone who suggests otherwise will have me to answer to. The threat was clear in Nathan's tone, and Henderson wisely retreated back into the house without another word. Nathan turned back to Grace with an apologetic expression. I am sorry you had to hear that, madam. Some men do not know the meaning of decency. Grace found herself fighting a smile. It had been a long time since anyone had defended her honor so fiercely. Thank you, Mr. Quinn. You are very kind. Just Nathan, please. And I meant every word I said. Your reputation will remain spotless. I give you my word as a gentleman. They worked together to transfer Grace's belongings from the borrowed wagon to Nathan's larger one that he had hitched to a team of horses at the livery. Margaret and Daniel helped, and Grace noticed how patient Nathan was with them, never speaking harshly even when Daniel accidentally dropped a crate. Lucy had completely warmed to the tall cowboy and was chattering away at him about her favorite doll, a worn cloth thing that had seen better days. Nathan listened to her as though she were telling him the most fascinating story in the world. As they prepared to leave town, Nathan insisted on stopping at the general store. The ranch has supplies, but probably nothing suitable for children. Let me get a few things before we head out. Mr. Quinn, I cannot let you spend money on us, Grace protested, but Nathan was already helping Margaret down from the wagon. Nathan, he corrected gently. And this is not for you. This is for me. I cannot abide the thought of children going without when I have the means to provide. Call it a personal failing if you like. Inside the store, Nathan moved efficiently through the aisles, selecting flour, sugar, dried beans, salt pork, fresh vegetables, and several kinds of candy that made Thomas's eyes go wide with delight. He added fabric that Grace recognized as good quality calico, perfect for making new dresses for Margaret and Lucy. When Grace tried to protest again, he simply said, "Payment in advance for the work you will be doing." That house has been empty for 3 months, and I imagine it will take considerable effort to make it livable again. The shopkeeper, an older woman named Mrs. Hendricks, gave Grace an approving nod. "You are in good hands, dear. I knew Nathan's uncle, good man he was. God rest his soul. If Nathan is anything like him, you and your children will be well looked after." The ride out to the ranch took just over an hour, with the children settled in the wagon bed among the supplies and furniture. Nathan rode alongside on his horse, occasionally dropping back to check on them. The Arizona landscape stretched out around them, all red rock and scrubby vegetation, with mountains rising in the distance like purple shadows. The air was dry and hot, but there was a stark beauty to it that Grace had come to appreciate in her years living in the territory. When the ranch came into view, Grace caught her breath. It was larger than she had expected, a sturdy 2-story house built from adobe and wood, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. There was a barn in good repair, several outbuildings, and what looked like a bunkhouse for ranch hands. Everything showed signs of neglect, weeds growing tall, paint peeling in places, but the bones were solid. With work, this could be a beautiful home. "It is more than I expected," Nathan admitted as he helped Grace down from the wagon. His hands spanned her waist easily, and he lifted her as though she weighed nothing at all. Grace felt her breath catch at the casual strength in him. "My uncle ran cattle here for 30 years. At his peak, he had 20 hands working for him, but he never married, never had children. In his last years, he let most of the hands go and managed with just a few men. They moved on after he passed, looking for steadier work." Margaret and Daniel were already exploring, running toward the barn with Thomas trailing behind them. Lucy held tight to Grace's hand, suddenly shy again now that they had arrived at this strange new place. William had fallen asleep against Grace's shoulder, heavy and warm. "Let me show you inside," Nathan said, taking most of the bags himself despite Grace's protests that she could carry her share. The front door stuck a bit before swinging open on creaking hinges. Inside, the house was dim and dusty, with furniture covered in sheets like ghosts. But even through the neglect, Grace could see the quality of the place. Wide plank floors, solid furniture, a large fireplace in the main room, and a kitchen with a proper cast iron stove. Nathan pulled sheets off the furniture, sending dust motes dancing in the shafts of light coming through the windows. "There are 4 bedrooms upstairs, plus the master room down here that I will take. The children can each have their own room if they like, or share as you see fit. You should take the largest of the upstairs rooms for yourself." Grace felt overwhelmed by the generosity of it. "This is too much, Nathan. Truly, this is far more than we deserve." He stopped what he was doing and looked at her seriously. "Mrs. Coleman, Grace, if I may call you that." At her nod, he continued, "You and your children deserve safety and comfort as much as anyone in this world. More than most, I would say, given what you have clearly endured. Please do not refuse what I am happy to give." That night, after the children were fed and settled into their new rooms with excitement and wonder at having real beds again, Grace found herself sitting on the front porch in the cooling evening air. Nathan had made himself scarce after supper, sensing perhaps that she needed time to process everything that had happened. He was in the barn, she thought, tending to the horses and settling them for the night. The stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky, bright and numerous in a way they never were in town. Grace wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the weight of the day finally settling on her shoulders. This morning she had been desperate and afraid, and now she sat on the porch of a beautiful ranch with her children safe and fed. It felt like a dream, something too good to be real. She heard Nathan's boots on the wooden steps before she saw him emerge from the darkness. He carried 2 cups of coffee and offered her one as he sat down on the porch rail, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "It is a lot to take in," he said quietly. "I imagine you are wondering what kind of man offers his home to strangers." Grace sipped the coffee gratefully. "The thought had crossed my mind, yes. Forgive me, but I have learned to be cautious. The world has not always been kind." Nathan nodded, his expression understanding. "My mother raised me to help those in need. She was a strong woman, had to be to survive on the frontier. My father died when I was young, killed in a dispute over cattle. She could have given up, could have sent me to an orphanage and tried to find an easier life for herself. But she did not. She worked herself to the bone to keep us together, to give me a home and a future." He paused, looking out at the darkness beyond the porch. "She died 5 years ago, influenza. I was not there when it happened. I was off working a drive in Montana, and by the time I got word and made it back, she had already been buried a month. I have carried that guilt with me every day since." Grace felt her heart squeeze with sympathy. "I am so sorry, Nathan. That must have been unbearably painful." "It was," he admitted, "but it also taught me something. Life is too short to waste opportunities to do good when they present themselves. When I saw you and your children being put out on the street, when I saw that fear in your eyes and the tears you were trying so hard not to shed, I knew what my mother would have wanted me to do. She would have welcomed you herself if she were still alive." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking their coffee and listening to the sounds of the night. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out, and another answered. The air smelled of sage and dust, and the faint sweetness of some night-blooming flower. "Tell me about your husband," Nathan said eventually, "if it is not too painful to speak of him." Grace found herself wanting to talk about Samuel, something she had not done much since his death. People in town had grown tired of her grief, had wanted her to move on and stop dwelling in the past. But Nathan's face showed only genuine interest and compassion. "Samuel was a good man," she began. "Not perfect, but good. We married when I was 18 and he was 22. He worked as a carpenter and he was skilled at it. We were happy, built a life together. Each time I told him I was with child, his face would light up like Christmas morning. He loved being a father more than anything in the world." Her voice caught slightly, but she pushed through. "The consumption came on slowly at first, just a cough that would not go away. Then he started losing weight, getting weaker. By the end, he could barely get out of bed. He died in the winter of '74, and I have been struggling to keep us afloat ever since. Work for women is hard to come by, and what work there is does not pay enough to support a family." Nathan's voice was soft when he spoke. "You are a strong woman, Grace Coleman, stronger than you probably realize. Not many could have held their family together through what you have endured." "I did not have a choice," Grace said simply. "They are my children. I would do anything for them." "That is what makes you strong," Nathan replied. "The fact that you keep fighting, keep pushing forward no matter how hard it gets, that takes real courage." Over the next few weeks, they fell into a routine that felt surprisingly natural. Grace rose early each morning to prepare breakfast for the household. Large meals of eggs and bacon and biscuits that Nathan and the children devoured with enthusiasm. After breakfast, while Nathan worked on repairs around the ranch, Grace tackled the monumental task of cleaning years of neglect from the house. Margaret proved to be a tremendous help, wise beyond her 12 years and capable with household tasks. She took over watching Lucy and William while Grace worked, entertaining them with games and stories. Daniel followed Nathan around like a shadow whenever he was allowed, fascinated by everything the cowboy did. Nathan was patient with the boy, teaching him how to mend fences, care for horses, and perform the 100 small tasks that kept a ranch running. Thomas was still young enough to play freely, and Grace often spotted him in the yard, creating elaborate games with sticks and stones. His laughter, which had been so rare in the weeks before the eviction, now rang out frequently. It made Grace's heart feel lighter every time she heard it. In the evenings, after supper, they would often gather on the porch. Nathan had produced a guitar from somewhere in the house, and he would play while they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple and red. His voice was pleasant when he sang, and the children would join in on the songs they knew. Grace found herself relaxing in ways she had not in years, the constant knot of worry in her stomach finally beginning to ease. She was also becoming increasingly aware of Nathan as a man, rather than just a benefactor. The way his muscles moved when he worked without his shirt in the heat of the day, the kindness in his eyes when he looked at her children, the rare but beautiful smile that transformed his whole face, his patience and gentle humor, the way he made her feel safe for the first time in years. One evening about a month after they had arrived at the ranch, Grace was washing dishes when Nathan came in from his evening chores. He poured himself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, watching her work. "The house looks wonderful," he said. "You have worked miracles in here, Grace." "I can barely recognize it as the same place." Grace felt herself blush at the praise. "It is a good house. It just needed some care and attention. Still, you have gone above and beyond what I could have expected. The garden is flourishing again, the house is clean and comfortable, and you cook better than any restaurant I have ever eaten in. I am the one getting the better end of this arrangement." Grace dried her hands on her apron and turned to face him. "Nathan, you gave us a home when we had nowhere to go. You have been nothing but kind and generous to me and my children. I do not think you understand what that means to us, what you have given us beyond just shelter and food. You have given us hope again." Nathan set down his coffee cup and took a step closer. They were alone in the kitchen, the children all upstairs getting ready for bed. Margaret was reading to the younger ones, her clear voice carrying faintly down the stairs. "Grace, I need to tell you something," Nathan said, his voice low and serious. "This arrangement, this business deal we made, it has become something more for me. I find myself thinking about you constantly. The way you smile when Lucy tells you one of her rambling stories. The way you sing softly to yourself when you think no one is listening. The way you love your children so fiercely and completely. I have come to care for you, and I cannot keep pretending I do not." Grace's heart was pounding so hard she was certain Nathan must be able to hear it. She had been fighting her own growing feelings for weeks now, telling herself she was being foolish, that he was just being kind and she was reading too much into it. "Nathan, she started, but he held up his hand gently. "You do not need to say anything right now. I know you might not feel the same way, and that is all right. I will not press you or make you uncomfortable, but I needed you to know the truth of my feelings. You have brought life back to this ranch to me. Before you came, I was just existing, going through the motions. Now I wake up each morning eager to see your face, to hear your voice, to be near you." Grace felt tears welling up in her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I thought I was being silly," she whispered. "I thought surely you could not see me as anything other than a woman you took pity on. A widow with 5 children and nothing to offer." Nathan closed the distance between them and gently cupped her face in his hands. His touch was warm and careful, as though she were something precious that might break. "Grace, you are the strongest, most beautiful, most remarkable woman I have ever met. The fact that you have 5 children does not make you less desirable to me. If anything, it shows what an incredible person you are, and you have plenty to offer. You have already given me more than you know." Grace felt herself leaning into his touch, her eyes closing. "I do care for you, Nathan, more than I probably should given how short a time we have known each other, but I am afraid. Samuel has only been gone 2 years. What will people think? What if this is just gratitude on my part or loneliness? What if I am making a terrible mistake? People will think what they think regardless of what we do," Nathan said softly. "As for the rest, we can take our time. There is no rush. I am not going anywhere, and neither are you. We can let this grow naturally, let our feelings develop at their own pace. I just wanted you to know that my intentions toward you are honorable and serious." Grace opened her eyes and looked up at him. In the lamplight, his face was all planes and shadows, but his eyes were warm with affection and something deeper, something that made her pulse race and her breath catch. "I would like that," she said quietly, "to see where this goes, to give ourselves a chance." Nathan smiled, and then slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wanted, he lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle and sweet, a soft press of mouth against mouth that sent warmth flooding through Grace's entire body. It had been so long since she had been kissed, so long since she had felt desired and cherished. She let herself sink into the feeling, her hands coming up to rest against Nathan's chest, where she could feel his heart beating as rapidly as her own. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Nathan rested his forehead against hers, his hand still cradling her face. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted with a slightly breathless laugh. "So have I," Grace confessed. And then they were both laughing softly, the tension that had been building between them finally released. From that night on, their relationship shifted and deepened. They were careful to maintain propriety in front of the children, not wanting to confuse them or move too fast. But in stolen moments, they would hold hands, or Nathan would brush a kiss across Grace's temple as he passed, or Grace would rest her hand on Nathan's shoulder as she refilled his coffee cup. Margaret, perceptive as always, noticed the change between them immediately. One afternoon, while they were working together on mending clothes, she said casually, "Mr. Quinn makes you happy, does he not, Mama?" Grace felt her cheeks warm. "He is a good man, and he has been very kind to all of us." Margaret's smile was knowing. "That is not what I asked. But it is all right. I am glad. You deserve to be happy again. We all do. And Mr. Quinn is nice. He does not get angry like some men do. He is patient with Thomas and Daniel, and he always has time to answer my questions even when he is busy." Grace set down her sewing and looked at her daughter seriously. "Would it bother you if Mr. Quinn and I were to become more than just employer and employee? I know it has not been very long since your father passed, and I do not want you children to think I am trying to replace him." Margaret's expression was solemn. "No one could replace Papa. We will always love him and miss him. But he is gone, Mama, and we are still here. Papa would not want you to be sad and alone forever. He loved you too much for that. If Mr. Quinn makes you smile again, if he treats you well and takes care of us, then I think Papa would approve." Grace felt tears spring to her eyes, and she pulled her daughter into a tight embrace. "When did you get so wise, my darling girl?" "I have always been wise," Margaret said with a hint of mischief in her voice. "You just do not always notice because I am still young." As summer deepened into fall, Nathan began hiring ranch hands again, bringing on 3 cowboys to help work the cattle and prepare for the winter months ahead. This meant more mouths to feed, but also more activity and life around the ranch. Grace enjoyed cooking for a full table again, and the men were always polite and respectful, tipping their hats and thanking her for every meal. One of the hands, a young man named Billy who could not have been more than 20, seemed particularly in awe of Nathan. Over supper one evening, he told stories of Nathan's reputation as a cowboy. "You are being ridiculous, Billy," Nathan said with obvious embarrassment, but the young man persisted. "It is true, Miss Grace," Billy insisted, using the respectful title everyone had adopted for her. "Mr. Quinn here is famous in Texas for his way with horses and cattle. They say he can gentle the meanest bronc and track cattle through any kind of terrain. He is also known for being fair and honest in all his dealings. That is rare in this business." Grace smiled at Nathan, enjoying his discomfort with the praise. Later, when they had a moment alone while she was setting bread to rise for the next day, she teased him about it. "So you are famous and you did not think to mention it," she said with a playful smile. Nathan shook his head ruefully. "Billy exaggerates. I am just a cowboy who knows his work. Nothing special about that." "I think there is plenty special about you," Grace said softly, moving closer to him. "You are honest and hard-working and kind. You have given me and my children a home and treated us like family. You make me feel things I thought I would never feel again." Nathan's arms came around her, pulling her close. They swayed together slightly, as though dancing to music only they could hear. "You make me feel alive, Grace. This ranch, it is just a place without you here. You and the children have turned it into a home. I cannot imagine my life without you in it now." "Then do not," Grace whispered against his chest. "Do not imagine it, make it real instead." Nathan pulled back just enough to look down at her. "Grace Coleman, are you asking me what I think you are asking me?" Grace felt her courage wavering, but she pushed through. "I am saying that I love you, Nathan Quinn. I am saying that I want to build a life with you, a real life as your wife if you will have me. I know it has only been a few months, and some might say it is too soon, but I know my heart. I know what I feel, and I am tired of being afraid to reach for happiness when it is right in front of me." Nathan's face broke into the widest smile Grace had ever seen on him. He lifted her right off her feet and spun her around, both of them laughing. When he set her down, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her deeply, pouring all his feelings into it. "Yes," he said when they finally broke apart. "Yes, 1,000 times yes. Grace, I would be honored to be your husband, to be a father to your children, to spend the rest of my life making you happy. I love you. God, I love you so much." They were married in late October in a small ceremony at the church in Clifton Hill with Pastor Williams officiating. Grace wore a dress she had made herself from the calico Nathan had bought that first day, with Margaret's help in fitting and finishing it. Nathan wore his best suit, looking more handsome than Grace had thought possible, his hair neatly trimmed and his face clean-shaven. All 5 children stood with them as they exchanged vows. Daniel and Thomas wore new shirts Grace had made, their faces scrubbed clean and hair slicked back. Lucy clutched a bouquet of wildflowers she had picked that morning with Nathan's patient help. Margaret held William, who was fascinated by the candles burning in the church and kept reaching for them with his chubby hands. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When Pastor Williams pronounced them man and wife, Nathan kissed Grace tenderly while the small gathering of friends and neighbors applauded. Mrs. Hendricks from the general store had tears running down her face, and even some of the rough cowboys from neighboring ranches looked misty-eyed. They held a celebration back at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard laden with food that the neighboring ranch families had brought. There was music and dancing, and Grace found herself passed from partner to partner as the cowboys took turns spinning her around the makeshift dance floor. But always her eyes sought out Nathan, finding him watching her with such love and pride that it made her heart feel too big for her chest. As the evening wore on and the children began to tire, Nathan pulled Grace aside. They walked a little way from the celebration, to a spot where they could see the lights and hear the music but have a moment of privacy. "Are you happy?" Nathan asked, his arm around her waist as they looked up at the stars. "Happier than I ever thought I could be again," Grace answered honestly. "This morning I woke up as a widow, alone in the world except for my children. Tonight I go to sleep as your wife, with a home and a family and a future that looks bright for the first time in years." Nathan turned her to face him, his expression serious. "I promise you, Grace, I will spend every day of my life trying to deserve you. I will work hard to provide for you and the children. I will love you and cherish you and protect you. You will never have to be afraid again." Grace reached up and traced the line of his jaw with her finger. "I know. I trust you completely. You have already proven who you are and what kind of man you are. I am the lucky one in this marriage, Nathan. You could have had any woman you wanted, someone younger without children, without the burden of a ready-made family." "They are not a burden," Nathan said firmly. "I love those children as though they were my own blood. Daniel with his serious eyes and his eagerness to learn, Margaret with her wisdom and kindness, Thomas with his wild imagination and his laughter, Lucy with her constant chatter and her affection. Even baby William, who has started calling me Papa and makes my heart melt every time he does it. They are not a burden, Grace. They are a blessing." That night, after the last of the guests had left and the children were all asleep upstairs, Nathan carried Grace over the threshold of the master bedroom. It was their wedding night, and Grace felt nervous despite having been married before. This was Nathan, a man she had known only a few months. But as he set her down gently and looked at her with such tenderness and desire, all her nervousness melted away. "I love you," she whispered as he began to undo the buttons of her dress with careful fingers. "I love you too," he replied. And then there were no more words, just the quiet sounds of their breathing and soft sighs as they came together as husband and wife for the first time. Their first winter together was hard but happy. The work was constant, with cattle to care for, repairs to make before the worst of the weather hit, and supplies to lay in. But they worked as a team, Grace managing the household while Nathan managed the ranch. The children thrived under the stability and security of their new life. Daniel had taken to ranch work like he was born to it. At 10 years old, he could already rope and ride better than some grown men. Nathan spent hours with him, teaching him everything he knew, and the bond between them grew strong. Grace would watch them working together and feel such gratitude that her son had found a good man to look up to. Margaret had blossomed into a lovely young woman, though she was still just 13. She helped Grace with everything from cooking to caring for the younger children to managing the household accounts. Grace was teaching her all the skills she would need to run her own home someday, and Margaret absorbed everything eagerly. Thomas had started attending the small school in town, riding in with Nathan when he went to conduct business. The teacher reported that he was bright and eager to learn, though prone to daydreaming. Lucy was counting the days until she was old enough to join him, practicing her letters with Margaret's patient instruction. William was growing like a weed, toddling around the ranch and getting into everything. He adored Nathan completely, following him around whenever possible and trying to copy everything he did. Nathan was endlessly patient with him, even when the toddler's help actually made tasks take twice as long. In February, Grace realized she had missed her monthly courses. At first, she thought it was just stress or the change in her life, but when it happened a second time, she knew. She was pregnant with Nathan's child. The realization filled her with a complicated mix of joy and fear. She was 30 years old now, and giving birth was always dangerous. She already had 5 children to care for, but she also desperately wanted to give Nathan a child of their own, a symbol of their love and their union. She told him one evening as they were getting ready for bed. Nathan's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He whooped with joy and picked her up, spinning her around despite her laughing protests to be careful. Then he set her down gently, his hands immediately going to her still flat stomach with wonder. "We are going to have a baby," he said, his voice filled with awe. "Our baby, Grace. A child born of our love." "Are you happy?" Grace asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Nathan said, pulling her close. "I am overjoyed, terrified but overjoyed. You have given me so much already, and now this. I feel like the luckiest man alive." The children were told the next morning at breakfast. The reactions were mixed. Margaret and Daniel seemed pleased, already mature enough to understand what a baby would mean. Thomas was excited at the prospect of having someone even younger to play with. Lucy seemed uncertain, perhaps worried about being displaced as the baby of the family. And William, at just over 2 years old, had no real understanding of what was being discussed, but picked up on the general excitement. As Grace's pregnancy progressed through the spring and into summer, Nathan became almost comically protective. He tried to insist she rest more, do less work, let others take care of everything. Grace had to firmly remind him that she had done this 5 times before and knew her own limits. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she said with exasperation one day when he tried to prevent her from lifting a basket of laundry. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time while still doing their daily work. I am not going to just sit around for 6 months waiting." But she also appreciated his concern, even if it was sometimes excessive. It was nice to feel so cherished and cared for. Samuel had been supportive during her previous pregnancies, but he had also taken her somewhat for granted, expecting her to carry on with all her usual duties regardless of how she felt. Nathan wanted to wrap her in cotton wool and protect her from everything, which was sweet even if it was not practical. The ranch continued to prosper under Nathan's management. He had expanded the herd and was building a reputation for quality cattle. Buyers came from as far away as California to look at his stock. The money was good, better than Grace had ever known, and Nathan was generous with it, making sure she and the children had everything they needed and quite a few things they just wanted. In late August, Grace gave birth to a healthy baby boy after a long but relatively uncomplicated labor. They named him Samuel Nathan, honoring both Grace's late husband and her current one. Nathan was present for the birth, holding Grace's hand and supporting her through each contraction, despite the midwife's scandalized protests that it was not proper for men to be in the birthing room. When the midwife placed the baby in Nathan's arms, Grace watched tears stream down his face unashamedly. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered, staring down at the tiny red face with complete wonder. "Grace, he is absolutely perfect." Little Samuel was indeed perfect, with a head of dark hair and eyes that would eventually turn the same blue-gray as his father's. He was a good baby, sleeping well and eating eagerly. William was fascinated by him, wanting to constantly pat his head and bring him toys. Lucy warmed up to him quickly once she realized she was still very much loved and important. The older children doted on him as well. Margaret was a natural with babies, able to soothe him when he fussed. Daniel was more awkward but tried his best, and Thomas liked to sing to him in a surprisingly sweet voice. It was clear that little Samuel would grow up surrounded by love. That winter was one of the coldest in years, with snow piling high and temperatures dropping dangerously low. But inside the ranch house, all was warm and cozy. Nathan had made sure they were well prepared with plenty of firewood and food stored. They would gather in the main room in the evenings, Nathan reading aloud from books while Grace nursed the baby, and the other children played quietly or did their lessons. One particularly snowy evening, when the wind was howling outside and the fire crackling merrily in the hearth, Nathan looked around at his family with such contentment that it made Grace's heart swell. Daniel was teaching Thomas how to play checkers. Margaret was helping Lucy with her letters. William was building an elaborate structure out of wooden blocks that would inevitably topple over, causing great distress and necessitating another rebuild. And baby Samuel slept peacefully in Grace's arms, his tiny fist curled against her breast. "This is everything I never knew I wanted," Nathan said quietly, coming to sit beside Grace on the sofa. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders and pressed a kiss to her temple. "A house full of children and noise and life. A wife I love more with each passing day. Work that is meaningful and a future that looks bright. I used to think I was destined to be alone, to live a solitary life drifting from place to place. But then, I rode into Clifton Hill and saw you standing there with your children, and everything changed." Grace leaned into him, breathing in his familiar scent of leather and soap and something uniquely Nathan. "I think we saved each other," she said softly. "I was drowning and you threw me a lifeline, but I think maybe you were drowning too in your own way. You needed a family as much as we needed a home. We fit together," Nathan agreed, "like pieces of a puzzle that were always meant to connect. I thank God every day that I happened to ride into town on that particular afternoon, that I saw you when you needed help, that you were brave enough to accept my offer, despite how strange it must have seemed." The years passed in a blur of seasons and growth. Daniel grew into a tall, strong young man who was Nathan's right hand on the ranch. At 18, he was handling responsibilities that would challenge men twice his age, and he did so with a competence that made both Grace and Nathan proud. He had started courting a girl in town, the schoolteacher's daughter, and Grace suspected there would be a wedding within the year. Margaret, at 16, was a beauty with her mother's dark hair and delicate features. She had several young men interested in calling on her, but she was in no hurry to marry, wanting to enjoy her youth and help with the younger children. She had a particular gift for teaching and talked about perhaps becoming a teacher herself someday. Thomas was 12 now, still prone to daydreaming but also showing an artistic talent that surprised everyone. He could draw anything he saw with remarkable accuracy, and Nathan had started buying him proper paper and pencils to encourage the skill. Perhaps he would become an artist, something almost unheard of in their rough frontier world, but Nathan insisted that all talents should be nurtured. Lucy was 9, a chatterbox who never met a stranger. She helped Grace around the house but also loved following Nathan around the ranch, asking endless questions about everything. She had a soft heart and was constantly bringing home injured animals that she would nurse back to health with the same fierce devotion her mother showed. William, now 6, was the image of his father Samuel, with the same sandy hair and hazel eyes. He had no memories of his biological father, knowing only Nathan as Papa, but Grace made sure to tell him stories so that Samuel would not be forgotten. William was adventurous and brave, always climbing to the highest branch or riding the most spirited pony, giving Grace minor heart attacks on a regular basis. And then there was little Samuel, now 3 years old, who was Nathan's shadow. He imitated everything his father did, from his walk to his way of tilting his hat. He had his father's smile and his mother's determination, a combination that was both endearing and occasionally exhausting. In the spring of 1880, Grace found herself pregnant again at 32 years old. This time there was less fear and more simple joy. They knew they could handle another child, and Nathan was delighted at the prospect of expanding their family further. Their daughter was born in December, a Christmas baby they named Rose. She had Grace's dark hair and Nathan's blue-gray eyes, and from the moment she drew her first breath, she had her father completely wrapped around her tiny finger. Nathan, who had been a loving but practical father to the boys, became positively soft with his daughter, unable to deny her anything. Grace watched with amusement as her strong, capable husband turned into mush whenever Rose so much as looked at him. "You are going to spoil that child rotten," she said fondly one afternoon, finding Nathan rocking Rose and singing to her despite the pile of work waiting for him outside. "She is perfect," Nathan said simply, as though that explained everything. "How can I not want to give her the world?" "She is a baby, Nathan. All babies are perfect. You need to maintain some discipline or she will grow up thinking she can get away with anything." Nathan just smiled and continued rocking his daughter, and Grace knew it was a lost cause. Rose would indeed grow up adored and somewhat spoiled, but she would also grow up secure in her father's love, and that was worth more than gold. The ranch continued to expand and prosper. Nathan now employed 10 full-time cowboys and brought on extra hands during busy seasons. They had built a new bunkhouse to accommodate everyone, along with an additional barn and several other outbuildings. The herd had tripled in size, and Nathan had started breeding horses as well as cattle, developing a reputation for quality stock. Grace had hired a girl from town to help with the housework and cooking for the ranch hands, giving her more time to focus on the children and household management. Mary was a sweet 18-year-old from a poor family, grateful for the steady work and fair wages. She lived in a small room off the kitchen and quickly became part of the extended ranch family. In 1882, Daniel married his sweetheart Rachel in a beautiful ceremony that had half the county in attendance. Nathan deeded them a portion of the ranch land to build their own house, wanting to keep his family close. Rachel was a lovely girl, intelligent and hardworking, and she fit into the family seamlessly. When she gave birth to Nathan and Grace's first grandchild the following year, a baby girl named Emma, the joy was overwhelming. Grace found herself thinking often about how far they had come. 8 years ago, she had been standing in the street in Clifton Hill with 5 children and no prospects, terrified and desperate. Now she sat on the porch of a thriving ranch, surrounded by family and abundance, secure in the love of a good man and the bright futures of her children. Nathan came out onto the porch and sat beside her, his movements slower now as he approached 40 but still strong and capable. He had a few silver threads in his dark hair now, and lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But to Grace, he was as handsome as the day she met him. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, taking her hand in his and bringing it to his lips. "About that day you rode into town and changed our lives," Grace said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "About how close we came to a very different fate. If you had ridden through an hour earlier or later, if you had not been the kind of man who stops to help strangers, if I had let pride prevent me from accepting your offer, so many things could have gone differently." Nathan squeezed her hand, but they did not. "We found each other exactly when we were supposed to. I do not believe in much, Grace, but I believe that some things are meant to be. We were meant to be." "I believe that too," Grace agreed. "I believe that God or fate or whatever force guides the universe brought us together, because we were meant to be a family. All of us. The children from my first marriage and the children we made together, and Daniel's wife and their baby and whoever else joins us along the way. This is our legacy, Nathan, not just the land or the cattle or the money. This family, this love, this is what matters. You are absolutely right, Nathan said, pulling her closer, and I would not change a single thing about our life together. Well, except maybe I would have found you sooner, so we could have had even more time together. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the Arizona landscape they both loved. In the distance, they could hear the children playing, Lucy's laughter mixing with William's shouts and little Samuel's attempts to keep up with his older siblings. Rose was napping inside, watched over by Mary, who had become like a part of the family. As the sky darkened and the stars began to emerge, Nathan turned to Grace with a serious expression. "Do you remember what I said to you that first day, when I offered you my home?" Grace smiled, remembering. "You said your house had room for all of us." "It did," Nathan said. "But it was not really a home until you and the children filled it with life and love. A house is just walls and a roof, but a home is people and memories and love. You taught me that, Grace. You showed me what it means to truly live rather than just exist. And for that, I will be grateful for the rest of my days." Grace felt tears prickling behind her eyes, happy tears that came so easily these days. "We made each other whole," she said simply. "I was broken when you found me, and in your own way, so were you. But together, we built something beautiful." "The most beautiful thing I have ever known," Nathan agreed, and then he kissed her softly, a kiss full of promise and contentment and the deep, abiding love that had grown between them over the years. Margaret called from inside that supper was ready, and they reluctantly pulled apart. As they stood to go inside, Nathan kept hold of Grace's hand, unwilling to break the connection even for a moment. Inside, the dining room was filled with noise and chaos as everyone found their seats. Daniel had brought Rachel and little Emma over for the meal, as they often did. Thomas was showing Lucy one of his drawings while William tried to steal a biscuit before the blessing. Little Samuel climbed into Nathan's lap the moment he sat down, and Rose started fussing in Mary's arms until Grace took her. Nathan looked around the table at the faces he loved, and his heart felt full to bursting. This was his family, these people who had come into his life through an act of simple kindness on a hot summer day 8 years ago. He had offered them his house, but they had given him so much more. They had given him purpose and love, and a reason to wake up each morning with joy in his heart. As they bowed their heads for the blessing, Nathan's hand found Grace's beneath the table and held tight. Whatever challenges the future might bring, whatever storms they might have to weather, they would face them together. They had built something strong and true, a family bound not just by blood but by choice and love and shared history. After the blessing, the noise and chatter resumed as bowls were passed and plates were filled. Grace looked across the table at her husband, at the way he laughed at something Daniel said, at the gentle way he made sure little Samuel had everything he needed on his plate, at the love that shone from his eyes every time he glanced her way. She thought about how different her life might have been if Nathan had not ridden into Clifton Hill that day. She might have ended up in a workhouse, her children scattered to orphanages or sent to work as servants. Instead, she was here, in this beautiful home, surrounded by family and plenty, married to a man who loved her more than she had ever thought possible. The years continued to pass in a rich tapestry of ordinary moments and milestone events. Margaret eventually did become a teacher, taking over the school in Clifton Hill when the previous teacher retired. She married at 22 to a lawyer from Tucson, and they settled in town where she could continue her teaching. She gave Nathan and Grace 3 more grandchildren over the years. Thomas's artistic talent was recognized by a visiting art dealer who saw his sketches and offered to sponsor him at an art school in San Francisco. It was hard to let him go at 16, but they knew they could not hold him back from his destiny. He wrote regularly and came home for visits, and eventually he became quite successful, with his paintings of Western life in demand throughout the country. Lucy grew into a beautiful and vivacious young woman who married a rancher from a neighboring spread. She and her husband lived close enough to visit often, and she was forever bringing over dishes she had made or her own children to play with their cousins. She gave Nathan and Grace 5 grandchildren who were just as talkative and friendly as their mother. William, restless and adventurous, became a lawman at 22, serving as a deputy sheriff in Clifton Hill. It worried Grace terribly, but she was also proud of his courage and his desire to make the world a better place. He eventually married a widow with 2 children of her own, proving that sometimes the best matches came from understanding shared struggles. He gave Nathan and Grace 2 more grandchildren and was a devoted stepfather to his wife's children. Little Samuel, true to his early devotion to his father, stayed on the ranch and learned everything Nathan could teach him. He had his father's way with horses and cattle, and at 21, when Nathan was starting to feel his age, Samuel took over much of the day-to-day management of the ranch. He married young at 23 to a girl from town who loved ranch life as much as he did. They gave Nathan and Grace 4 grandchildren and lived in the house that Daniel had built when he first married. Rose, as predicted, grew up adored by everyone around her. But despite being spoiled by her father, she had her mother's practical nature and kind heart. She became a nurse, training in Tucson and returning to serve the community in Clifton Hill. She married a doctor at 25, and together they built a small hospital that served the growing town and surrounding ranches. She gave Nathan and Grace 3 grandchildren. Daniel, Nathan's right hand for so many years, eventually took over the original house and headquarters when Nathan and Grace decided to build a smaller place on a quiet corner of the ranch. Daniel and Rachel had 5 children total and ran the ranch with the same integrity and hard work that Nathan had always shown. As Nathan approached 60, he slowed down considerably, his body bearing the wear of decades of hard physical labor. But he remained sharp of mind and was always available to offer advice when Samuel or Daniel needed it. He spent his days doing lighter tasks, training young horses, mending tack, and most of all, spending time with Grace. Grace, at 56, was still beautiful in Nathan's eyes, though her dark hair was now streaked with silver, and her face showed the lines of a life well lived. She had slowed down too, passing most of the heavy housework to younger women, but she still managed the household accounts and kept track of everyone in their ever-expanding family. They would sit together on the porch of their smaller house in the evenings, just as they had in those early days, watching the sun set and talking about everything and nothing. The ranch spread out before them, prosperous and thriving, a testament to everything they had built together. "Do you have any regrets?" Nathan asked one evening, his hand holding hers as it had thousands of times before. "Is there anything you wish you could have done differently?" Grace considered the question seriously. "I wish Samuel had not died so young, so he could have seen the wonderful people his children became. I wish I could have given you more children of our own, though 2 seems greedy when I look at all we have. But true regrets? No, my love. I would not change our path because it led us here to this life, to this family, to each other." Nathan nodded, satisfied with her answer. "I wish I could have found you sooner, saved you some of the hardship you endured, but otherwise I agree. Our life has been good, better than I ever dreamed possible. We have built something that will outlast us, Grace. Our children and grandchildren, they will carry on what we started. The ranch will stay in the family, and they will remember us and tell their children about us. We will be the legend, Grace said with a slight smile. The widow with 5 children who was evicted, and the cowboy who said his house had room for them all. Our grandchildren will tell the story to their grandchildren, and maybe they will add embellishments, make it even more dramatic than it was. It was pretty dramatic, Nathan said with a laugh, though I suppose any good story gets better with the telling. As long as they remember the important parts. That love can come from unexpected places. That family is not just about blood but about choice and commitment. That kindness and generosity are never wasted. That is the legacy I want to leave. That is the legacy we will leave, Grace corrected gently. We built this together, Nathan. Every step of the way we were partners. You could not have done it without me, and I certainly could not have done it without you. We were meant to find each other that day in Clifton Hill. As the years crept toward 1895, both Nathan and Grace knew their time was limited. They had lived full, rich lives and had no complaints. They had seen all 7 children grow to healthy, happy adulthood. They had 19 grandchildren and counting, with the first of their great-grandchildren on the way. On a warm spring evening, surrounded by family who had come from all over for what had become an annual gathering, Nathan and Grace sat in places of honor on the big porch of the original ranch house. Children ran and played in the yard, just as their own children had done decades before. The smell of food cooking filled the air, and laughter echoed across the land. Samuel stood to make a toast, raising his glass high. "To my parents," he said, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "To the 2 people who showed me what real love looks like. Who built all of this from nothing but determination and faith and their devotion to each other. To Ma and Pa, the heart of this family, the foundation on which all of this was built. May we always remember their example and strive to live up to the legacy they created. To Ma and Pa." The crowd echoed, raising their glasses. Nathan looked at Grace and she looked back at him, and in that moment they did not need words. Their eyes said everything that needed to be said. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for this life we built together. Thank you for everything." That night, lying in bed in the quiet darkness of their small house, Nathan held Grace close. "I love you," he whispered into her silver-streaked hair. "I have loved you since that first day I saw you standing in the street with your children, refusing to let despair defeat you. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Grace replied, her hand over his heart, feeling its steady beat. "You were my salvation, my partner, my everything. Whatever time we have left, whether it is years or days, I am grateful for every single moment." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, content in the knowledge that they had lived well and loved deeply and left the world better than they found it. Nathan passed first, in the spring of 1897, at the age of 63. He died peacefully in his sleep with Grace beside him, his heart simply giving out after a life well lived. The funeral was massive, with people coming from all over the territory to pay their respects to a man who had been known for his integrity, kindness, and the beautiful family he had raised. Grace mourned him deeply, but without bitterness. She had been blessed with over 20 years as his wife, 20 years of love and partnership and joy. She missed him terribly, the space beside her in bed feeling impossibly empty, but she took comfort in knowing he had died happy and surrounded by love. She lived 2 more years without him, spending her time with her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling stories about Nathan and making sure his memory stayed alive and vibrant. She never lost her smile or her warmth, though anyone could see she was ready to join her beloved husband. Grace Coleman Quinn passed away peacefully in her sleep in the spring of 1899 at the age of 60. Her children found her in the morning, a smile on her face as though she had been dreaming of something wonderful. Perhaps she had been dreaming of Nathan, waiting for her as he had promised he would. They buried her next to Nathan on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the Arizona landscape they had both loved. The headstone reads simply, Grace Coleman Quinn, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. She loved deeply and was loved in return. The ranch continued on, passed down through the generations just as Nathan and Grace had hoped. The family remained close, gathering every spring for a reunion that grew larger with each passing year. They would always start the gathering with a toast to Nathan and Grace, the patriarch and matriarch who had started it all. The story of how they met became legend, told and retold to each new generation. The widow with 5 children who was evicted. The cowboy who said his house had room for all of them. The love that grew from a simple act of kindness on a hot summer day. The family that was built not just on blood but on choice and commitment and devotion. In the end, Nathan and Grace left behind more than just land and money and buildings. They left behind a legacy of love, a lesson in how one moment of compassion could change not just individual lives but echo through generations. They showed that family could be found in unexpected places, that love could bloom even in the hardest circumstances, and that the greatest wealth was not measured in cattle or acres, but in the people you loved and who loved you in return. Their great-great-grandchildren still live on that ranch in Arizona, still tell the story of Nathan and Grace, still gather every spring to celebrate the family that began with a chance meeting in Clifton Hill in 1876. The house Nathan offered that day still stands, though it has been added onto and renovated many times. But the porch where they sat so many evenings remains, a testament to 2 people who found each other when they both needed it most and built something beautiful that would last long after they were gone.